You are listening to the Better 2 podcast with DM Needham. Hi gang, Donna here. Today I talked to Mike Messier about his move from Connecticut to Florida. He did so right before the pandemic, and he really didn't have a plan, but it ended up working out for the best. We also talk about his documentary filmmaking, pro wrestling, and several other things in between, including reality. So stay tuned. Hi Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Donna. Thanks for having me on your show today. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Good. So you decided that you needed a change of lifestyle, correct? And you just uprooted your life and decided to move to Florida.
Yeah, I was in New England for quite some time, and some things happened. Unfortunately, I don't really want to say who, but some close people to me passed away, and that kind of lifted the obligation for me to remain where I was in New England. And there was other reasons, perhaps, to stick around. You know, I had been building connections and experience with entertainment in various forms up there for quite some time, you know, doing dinner theater acting, making my own films, trying to get a bigger budget film produced at some point, but really kind of just spinning my wheels for quite some time. And to other folks, maybe I was doing well, but to my own set of standards and expectations, I wasn't. So, you know, the weather and everything else kind of just made me feel like I was way overdue to get out of there and make a move. And there was a lot of, at least for me, a fair amount of pressure from family members and friends to stay there, not understanding why I would leave. But what I had to come to the conclusion, Donna, was this was my life, my decision. I was pretty miserable on many levels. And why be miserable? You know, life's too short to be miserable. So I had to kind of just stick to my guns or not even stick to them, create them and get going.
I can understand. So why Florida?
Well, a friend of mine had moved to Jacksonville, Florida about 7 years before me. And he was a gentleman in his 70s. Him and his wife had moved there, and he kind of did a good sell job on it for me, you know, like selling me the city. And one thing that he said that's resonated was he would only move to Jacksonville, Florida. He wouldn't move to any other city in Florida. And I found that to be an interesting statement because most people think of Orlando or maybe Miami or Tampa. So for him to, and my friend, his name is Harrison, he did an evaluation of the whole world, apparently. Like he broke down like cost of living and weather and chances of getting hit by a hurricane and all these other statistical things that he did. So he did a lot of the research for himself, but he started preaching to me about how great he was enjoying it. So in the February of 2019, I started a road trip on Super Bowl Sunday, driving from Rhode Island, first to Maryland, where a friend of mine put me up for the night, and we watched the Super Bowl there. And then continuing through North Carolina, where I visited my old college in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I think I went to Savannah, Georgia for a night or two, and then eventually got to Jacksonville as a exploration visit. So this was before I moved. And so I was in Jacksonville for about 2.5 weeks. I stayed at a pretty inexpensive motel. That was an experience. And I explored what I could of the area. And I did really enjoy it, you know, and I did really like it. And then I came back, and the initial thought was that I was going to move in 2020 at some point. But when I came back to Rhode Island, I was like, man, I think I want to move this year. You know, I sped up the game plan, so to speak, and I made it happen in September of 2019. And one test of that was a friend of mine had cast me in a film that he was producing in Texas, and he was buying like the Super Saver discount airline tickets, you know, 8 months in advance of filming. and he wanted to know where to buy my airplane ticket from, Rhode
Mhm.
Island or Florida or what. And so that's really what I said, geez, this guy's expecting me to make a decision. I better commit. So I said, well, get the ticket from Jacksonville, and once this other gentleman, Jamie Reborn is his name, once he bought me an airline ticket from Jacksonville, Florida for October of 2019, and I'm still in Rhode Island and I haven't moved, that's when I really said, well, I guess I have to move now because I've got someone else's money wrapped up into this thing. And sure, you could always change an airline ticket if you had to, but that kind of pressure or that expectation was really a catalyst for me to get going. And I learned all the things that come with moving, from one state to another, which I hadn't done in quite some time, and certainly hadn't done spearheading my own project, so to speak.
So did you end up going to Texas to work on this project?
Yeah. No, I was able to move to Florida in September of 2019. I had to make 2 round trips. I basically moved myself. I just packed my car full of stuff and made 2 round trips. And my sister did help me out quite a bit. But I had to pack my own stuff and just get the car moving and going. And I couldn't not get to Texas. So I did get to Texas as expected, and we shot the film and everything. So
Awesome. So do you think that, I know that you had done a lot of production in New England, in the New England area. So since you've moved, have you been able to still handle doing those things in Florida now?
well, there's had to be a modification, Donna. I was here in Jacksonville for about 5 months when suddenly pandemic time came. So the industry, the independent, do-it-yourselfers, some have continued to do stuff. I didn't really build as many connections or friendships or whatever that I would have had liked to before the pandemic struck. I was still getting settled in my own mind. So I've kind of, modified my creativity to do things more that I can do on my own, such as, writing this novel here. I kind of learned that, well, I can write scripts. I've been writing screenplays for a long time. Some get made, some don't. It's very frustrating when you write a script and it doesn't get made for whatever reason, usually money. But what I can do is I can learn how to self-publish novels on Amazon. And that was something that had been tinkering around in my brain for years. In fact, I had even written this book in 2018, but I had not actually published it. And looked into all the different ways that publishing groups offer to work with writers. A lot of times they want you to pay them a lot of money to get published with a lot of, I would say, false promises and false hopes that they're going to make you a star writer. And I just did the research and said, man, submitting my book or my novel to different publishing companies and writing query letters, this is far too much like the film world where you're always kind of exposing yourself and groveling at the feet of production companies or whoever else or agents or it's always in the film world there's always this feeling with the artist that not only do you have to do the art, but then you have to market yourself and grovel at the feet of these mighty companies. And I said, I don't want to go down that path with this novel. If this is me, I'm writing this thing. Let me figure out how to self-publish. When I first attempted to do that on Amazon, I think they had a freeze for a while because of the pandemic. So it wasn't easy to self-publish initially. And then I just kind of let it go for 4 or 5 months. And I checked in later and suddenly it was working again. The self-publishing on Amazon I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened. I've put my energies more into writing and also memorizing a monologue. You watched the Disregard the Vampire, a Mike Messier documentary piece before our interview that's available on YouTube for all your watchers to watch it. The character in that piece, the antagonist, has kind of been volleyed around by 2 other actors at this point, and I'm just going to do it myself. I've memorized the monologue of that character, Jean Lacroix Distance, and I've grown my hair out longer, and I've grown this, goatee and mustache to give the character more of the look that I think would be appropriate. Normally, my hair is not this long, and so I just figured why am I giving this great role to other actors who aren't following up on it? Why don't I follow up on it myself?
So are you planning on redoing that project then?
Yeah, and the first step, Donna, is like I said, from the book, Distance from Avalon, I've memorized a monologue
Mhm.
from the antagonist character,
Right.
John Lacroix Distance, and I've memorized that, and I filmed it just a week ago, actually, in my backyard here, kind of as a rough draft. But now I'm going to enlist somebody to film it, whether it's on a cell phone or a better camera, hopefully. And I'll take on this project, and the monologue will be kind of a proof of concept, is what they call it, and I'll just keep digging away at it. The other thing is I've been doing YouTube for 3 years. Didn't really realize that there could be money to be made on YouTube. I always kind of did YouTube half-heartedly, not really expecting anything of it. But once I did some research, once again, because of the pandemic, like you start thinking, what can I do with my life? And one thing that I realized is, wow, I only need 1,000 subscribers to start getting into the ballpark of monetization. And of course, there's more to it, but the bottom thing, the first step is 1,000 subscribers. And at the time, I probably had 300 subscribers, kind of by chance. So then I said, well, what's my attempt, or what's my game plan to get 1,000 subscribers? And I started doing more research on that, and there's so many people on YouTube already that have advice YouTube video channels to get more subscribers for you. So, and there's this application called TubeBuddy, which I had never heard of until I did this research. And one of these people, I think her name was Sunny, mentioned TubeBuddy, and of course she had a referral link, and I went ahead and signed up to give her a chunk of change, because she gets a bonus when I sign up and I try it. It's a month-to-month subscription. It's working for me. Now I have 876 subscribers, and a year ago I had about 300. So it's not a million subscribers, but I feel like I'm just getting started.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of your projects. There was a project that was wrestling.
Wrestling with Sanity.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a project that people, if they're more visually, entertained, the short film series Wrestling with Sanity short film trilogy is 33 minutes, and that's up on YouTube. And on the channel is called Subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel. So people can watch it at any time. The actors, Mark Carter, Mauro Canepa, Irina Pellegrad, did a great job. I'd still love to get that project fully made. The pro wrestler Raven at one time agreed to be in it. The problem, I guess, with that project, like a lot of projects, is show me the money. Like I didn't have the money, and I still don't as of this minute, to give that script the integrity that it deserves, which would not be millions of dollars, but I would say a $250,000 budget would be great for that movie. But maybe more, because the pandemic is causing movies to increase in budget because of all the things you have to do, with protocol. So that was one of those things, Donnell, that was a frustration. It was like, hey, I'm putting 4 or 5 years into trying to get this movie produced. I have supposed producers who are more or less friends of mine, but people that claim to be producers showing an interest, and then they kind of float off and do other things. That was a frustration, to be honest with you.
I worked on a low budget TV show as an actress, then turned it into marketing, then turned into a whole being the line producer and wearing several other hats, including handling the budget. And we produced 6 episodes for $200,000. But that also was the marketing bit too. And quite honestly, we didn't have enough money, and it went absolutely nowhere. So I understand the frustration.
Yeah, it is frustrating, especially when, as the creator, in this case me, it's like you feel like you're letting people down, and that's one of the themes of that documentary, Disregard the Vampire Mike Messier documentary, is the feeling of letting people down and what to do to get beyond that feeling and to actually make something happen.
Yeah. I mean, being a creative, it is a hard thing to do because you have to be creative. You have to have the funds. You have to be able to market it. You are a, dare I say, a one person show when you decide to take it out on your own and be an independent.
Yeah, and for what I'm trying to do, Donna, with the YouTube thing, is I'm hoping to get the. I already have the watch hours are in range to be profitable. I need to get those remaining 124 subscribers. And so, if anyone listening to this or watching this on YouTube wants to subscribe, it's subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel. And what I tell people is, on my channel, there's there kind of is something for everybody, but not everything I do is going to be for everybody. I have a lot of original stuff. The Messier Mantra, I think, is my TV show that I did in Massachusetts. I've got holistic healers, I've got other actors, writers, a boxing promoter. I did about 150 episodes of that TV show. It's an interview show. I think people would love that show. That's pretty mainstream. But my pro wrestling rants and the Suicide Girls burlesque and Fozzy in concert the other day and beach wrestling, these kind of more niche things. I'm not expecting every subscriber to watch these things, but if they do subscribe to my channel and they dig around, I think they'll find something that they do enjoy.
So have you explored TikTok since it is a visual medium?
Well, I got turned off from TikTok when there was some type of allegation of Chinese propaganda or Chinese observations of the users. Am I mistaken, or was that a thing for a while?
There was mention of it, but apparently, then if I remember correctly, they were forced to, in order to stay in the country, they ended up having to have somebody in America buy part of it.
I guess that turned me off to it, to be honest with you. I didn't want to do it after I heard about that.
Fair enough. I just was thinking because it's a visual medium that would be something. And Instagram now has Reels, which is very similar to what TikTok does.
Yeah, what I found for me, Donna, is like for instance, YouTube just started this shorts thing, hashtag shorts, where it's like either 15 seconds or a minute, and it's kind of a way to get your stuff out there to more people. And I've been doing some of those. I think for me, I kind of like the longer running content thing. I'm not really into this has got to be 15 seconds or less. I'd rather do a little bit longer or a lot longer, to be honest with you. It's just a stylistic thing. It's nothing against shorter pieces. I'm just more of a longer guy.
So when did you start as an actor? Because I'm looking at I was looking at your resume and it was talking about some of the films and television you worked on. So when did you start as an actor?
Well, I can remember being a little kid and we would literally have puppet shows with sandwich bags in first grade. And for whatever, I like doing that, And then I think in fifth grade, I was in the school, or third grade, the school play was Stone Soup. So me and a kid named Greg Vire, I still remember his name. We played like the French soldiers or whatever in Stone Soup. But I think it kind of got dormant for me as an actor until the end of college. A friend of mine and I got together and made a movie called Man and You, A Providence Love Story, which is an 80-minute movie. It took us a year and a half to make. My friend George Lamastro and I used the school's mini DV cameras, which at the time were the big thing. And our school was not a film school. It was just a regular Rhode Island college. And we just kind of made a movie for no budget. And it took us a year and a half to make this 80-minute movie. And the point is, I cast myself as the lead, and that was kind of my on-the-job training, So that was probably the first thing that I did. And around the time I started taking a playwriting class in college, and in the playwriting class, because I was an English major with a creative writing concentration, a lot of my co-students in that class were in the theater department at the college, and you would kind of take turns acting out everybody else's scripts. And a friend of mine, Lenny Schwartz, in the class would give me scripts to read. Nobody else really did because I wasn't a theater major. I wasn't in their clique, so to speak. And I just kind of saw, Donna, that I think I'm about as good as an actor as anybody else in here. Like in this class full of theater majors, I didn't feel that I was better, but I didn't feel that I was worse. So at the same time, I was kind of doing that movie. Then I took an acting course at a place called Perishable Theater in Providence, Rhode Island. The teacher, it was an introduction class, but the teacher was pretty hard on everybody. We started with 20 students and ended with about 8. Like
Yeah.
one of the 8 that finished the class. So I was like, this is an intro class, but um, you know, uh, ironically, I've worked with the teacher since. He's a good guy. It was kind of like a boot camp for an intro to acting class. But I just started getting the acting bug there, and I had an HBO audition in 2002 for a pilot that never hit the air. But that was a vote of confidence. Just the fact that HBO flew me from Rhode Island to meet Jay Roach, who directed Meet the Parents, and Austin Powers. I'm auditioning for him, and I'm kind of new into this whole world. That was a boost of confidence. Although the show did not hit the air, I still felt good about the experience. I used some of that experience for Rejected by Reality, which was a 25-minute doc I did at the time, which was about me being rejected by reality TV shows. One thing I learned along the way, Don, I guess pretty quick, was if I'm going to be rejected or if I'm going to be turned away from something, I'm going to try to turn that around to make it work for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to learn something from the experience or at least get a laugh out of it, if nothing else. So, Rejected by Reality was kind of an early thing for me that I was rejected by the Jerry Springer show, the World Wrestling Entertainment, and the HBO thing fell apart. But I'm going to make a 25-minute movie about it, which I think it got 4.5 stars on Film Thread at the time, because I'm not going to let their judgments or their lack of follow through on their own project stop me from getting something out of this experience.
So, looking back now that you moved, you really didn't have a plan when you moved. You just kind of did it. Has it met your expectations of what you thought it would be?
Well, I think, going back to the title of your podcast, Better to Podcast, is it better to or not to type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, uh, clearly, because Rhode Island was hit so hard by the pandemic, like I went up there in April of 2021 to do a movie, and I was happy to do it. But I'm looking around, and the movie theaters are closed permanently up there. The movie theaters that were there since the 80s, and I worked at that movie theater when I was in college, and now it's done. Well, here in Jacksonville, there's 3 movie theaters I go to on a regular basis within driving distance. Um, Went up to New England, Rhode Island, and try to go to a Starbucks and there's a security guard making sure that people don't hang around the Starbucks too long. You've got to get your coffee to leave. So I'm not trying to pick on the state, but I'm saying I would have gone nuts, and I had some neighbors, on a very real level here. I had neighbors that I'm sure that they went pretty close to insane during this pandemic because they were pretty close to insane without the pandemic. So I'm like, I'm glad I wasn't going through this experience with them.
Yeah.
So the answer is, yeah, most definitely. I'm glad I moved when I did. I was able to go to Disney a few times because they've been open with, masks and temperature checks. But I kind of enjoy the smaller crowds, to be honest with you. I'm like, hey, I can go to this amusement park and escape from the tragedies that our world is going through. So without a doubt, it was the right move to make in retrospect.
So, what do you see coming up for you? What's your next project going to be?
Well, like I said, I'm working on this monologue from a distance from
Right.
Avalon.
Right.
I've got it memorized, and basically, hopefully, within a week or two, I need a better shirt. Like once I'm kind of a big guy, so I need like a bigger shirt, and it's a costume piece. It needs to be like a Renaissance shirt or something with some style. So I'm kind of on the lookout for a shirt. I'm on the lookout for someone with a camera to film it. I've been talking to someone in St. Augustine, Florida to do that. And then I've got Fight or Play Basketball, which is another screenplay of mine that I'm converting to Kindle. Kindle on Amazon has this new book thing going on where you're encouraged to write a book in installments, kind of like the Stephen King, The Green Mile from the 90s. Like
Yeah.
instead of writing the whole book and releasing it once, your minimum is 600 words at a time. So I'm sure many people are just taking some book they've written and not published and just copying and pasting 600 words or 1,000 words at a time. But I'm actually doing it the hard way. I'm writing the book in live time and then publishing it. So Fight or Play Basketball is on that forum. I think people can get the first 3 installments for free and then decide whether or not they want to continue reading. And I'm working on the sequel to this one, A Distance from Avalon. I'm writing the sequel now as well, which I've taken a little bit of a break on to do the Fight or Play Basketball. So there you have it.
Okay. So, are you going to be doing any more film production after what you're working on? I mean, I know this is the big project. Are you working on another script as well, or are you just going to focus on writing on Vela for the Flight or Fight Basketball?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, a friend of mine has offered me a role in a movie that he's making in September in Rhode Island, probably a day player role, which I'll go up for that. As between writing the sequel to this one and writing the Fight or Play Basketball on the Kindle, I think that's enough. I think for me, one thing it's true with a lot of people. It's what's the new idea? What's the next thing? Well, I always be a finisher. Finish the thing you're working on now before you go off and do 5 other things. And I've had a problem with that, as the doc explains. And a lot of my friends and associates have the same problem. It's always like a need to film, but not a responsibility to edit. And it gets frustrating when all these films are floating around on computers and hard drives, yet no one seems to take a couple of months to sit there and do the hard work, which is the editing. And that gets frustrating. So for me, Donna, my thing now is, I got enough to write. I really just have to write what I've already started. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You had a film festival, didn't you?
Yeah, I still do. Avalonia Festival. And once again, it's all Italian. People got to show the book 20 times, but they look at the word Avalon,
Right.
And then you put IA at the end of it. Avalonia Festival is a derivative from Distance from Avalon. So the Avalonia Festival will have its 6th event in November of 2021. We actually did have a live event, because a lot of film festivals were doing
No problem.
a lot of film festivals were doing web only. But here in Florida, we could do live events if done in a certain way. And just kind of knowing that my event, Avalonia Festival 5, I found a venue that had a room to put the big screen TV and to have chairs for everybody and have an open door in the back so that the air can circulate. Well, I figured that's about as good as I can get for protocol, right? I mean, to have a room where you can actually watch the movies and have chairs and have an open door for air circulation. I did the live event. A lot of film festivals that I entered and other people entered, suddenly you discover you're not going to have a film festival to go to. You're just going to have a website to look at. And I really, for me, although, understanding about the whole thing, but I feel like that's not giving people their money's worth. If they spend $20 or $10 or $5 to enter Avalonia Festival with the idea that there's going to be a live event, if there's any way to do a live event, I'm going to do it. And I did it, so there was a live event at Ormond Beach at the art gallery there. So there will be an Avalonia Festival 6, and people can go to avaloniafestival.com. And I did do a photography festival this year as well. I discovered another thing that, hey, why not have photography? Why not have a festival? And that one was web only, but it was advertised as web only. And that really came out pretty well. I mean, there's so many great photographs that people were making, and I don't see a lot of photography festivals out there, at least in my circles. I'm not a professional photographer, but I can tell a good photograph when I see it. And my judge from Japan, Kazuya, did a great job helping me to judge these photographs, and that's on Avalonia Festival as well.
So, if you could play the what if game, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
That's a great question. I'd really like to have this. I see The Distance from Avalon as being a trilogy of books, so I'd like to have them completed. And I'd really love within 5 years to have one of these projects, if not two or three, in the production stages, if not completed, whether it's fight or play basketball or a distance from Avalon, something bigger to come would be great. And but what I've kind of learned is I can't control everything. I can't control Steven Spielberg or Paramount Pictures or Lionsgate discovering Mike Messier's scripts or whatever. And I can't control if people in the business tell me they're going to do something, and sometimes they do, and a lot of times they don't. But what I can control is the writing myself. I can control whether or not I write the fight or play basketball on this Kindle new thing. I can control doing that. I can control if I self-publish these books, but I'm not in control of the whole world as much as I'd like to be. So just doing what I can do.
How do you think, or how do you feel about the fact that now, for a filmmaker or television producer, there are so many different avenues now of ways to put your message out? I'm not just talking YouTube, I'm talking Netflix, I'm talking, but you have all the streaming services, so there's a lot of opportunity there. I know it's a hard thing to find the right person to get in touch with, but what do you think about that? I mean, do you consider it a blessing or a curse, because now there are so many avenues?
I think it's a blessing. I think it's whenever there's more distribution, more ways of getting content or getting your content to people, that's for the better of the artist, especially if you're not born, a Barrymore or a Coppola. If you're outside of and look, like a lot of businesses, there's nepotism in Hollywood. People make a big deal if someone's kid is doing something, yet you could go to any community college and see a bunch of talented kids doing a lot more things, right? So there's some nepotism to the Hollywood world. So anytime you kind of even the odds or the playing field a bit by having more distribution, more channels, more streaming, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever, that's for the betterment of people like me who weren't born into a Hollywood family.
So, when you were younger, did you see yourself being a filmmaker? I'm talking as a kid.
My the first time I can remember somebody asking me what I wanted to do with my life, I think it was probably my mom, and I think I responded to sportscaster. So for whatever reason, I thought like being a sportscaster on TV would be fun. There was a guy named George Michael who was a big deal in the DC area when I was a kid. Legendary Channel 4 news sportscaster. Just seemed to be a great guy who had a lot of fun. So for whatever reason, I thought it'd be fun to be him. That didn't. I never pursued that when I got older, but I do like sports. I like watching sports, but that's I think the film thing came more with teens and college time.
But maybe when you think about it, your analysis of wrestling, or your rants, as you were calling them on YouTube, maybe that's kind of a nod to the sportscaster in you.
Yeah, I definitely. I did some color commentary recently for a show here in Florida, FEW, Future Evolution Wrestling. I did the color commentary. I used to do commentary for Top Rope Promotions out of Fall River, Mass. I've interviewed Bob Backlund. Ox Baker, who was this legendary pro wrestler, was a great friend of mine. I interviewed Ox a year before he passed away. And that movie, Ox Baker, One of the Boys, is on my channel. And, sure, I love pro wrestling, mixed martial arts. As a spectator, I learned at one point, I did wrestle a few matches myself, but I learned that I didn't like getting hurt, quite honestly. Although it's whatever you want to call wrestling, predetermined, but the guys still get hurt. I wrestled about 13 matches, and then I lost a retirement match, and I never came out of retirement. I honored that retirement stipulation because I didn't like getting dropped on my head, to be quite honest with you. My feeling was that the strongest muscle in my body is my brain, and I want to try and protect that. So allowing guys to hit me in the head with a chair or DDT me or suplex me was not something I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks about wrestling being fake, and that it's scripted, that there's a script that they follow, like in the bigger matches and stuff. And I do remember as a kid or teen, my mom used to take me, because my grandmother loved wrestling. We actually went to some of the wrestling matches and saw Junkyard Dog and Andre the Giant, some of those older school wrestlers. And there was a lot of talk about it being fake back then. But you're still, even if it's fake, you're still going through those motions and you're still hitting that mat. And it's not, I mean, it can't be easy on the body.
No, and unfortunately, Donna, we've seen a lot of the wrestlers of my generation and guys like Ravishing Rick Rude, uh, you know, passed away. Kurt Hennig passed away. Guys that wrestled in their prime in their 20s and 30s, in their 40s and 50s, they're dropping dead left and right. You know what I mean? So it's sad because you wonder about what caused them to die so young. Was it concussions? Was it the pills, the pain pills they had to take to deal with this crazy business they're in? And there's a whole bunch of things there. JYD passed away in a car accident, which was unfortunate. That could happen to anybody, but it's just sad when you see some of your heroes dying young, and it makes you wonder, man, I really liked watching that guy wrestle, and he took some shots to the head with a chair. Did those chair shots lead to this guy's early death? And if you think about it that way, it's harder to enjoy watching the pro wrestling, because then you feel a little guilty. Like, man, is my enjoyment of this thing leading to these guys dying? You know, who knows?
But a lot of people don't look at it that way. They are first to judge football, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. I've watched some football, not, but the impacts on football are hard, but they at least have some protection. A wrestler has none. And a chair, I mean, if somebody hits you with a chair, I'm sure it hurts like hell.
Right. It does. Yeah. And I mean, some ways they can put their hands up to block it a little bit, but the reality is getting hit with a chair is getting hit with a chair. You know, I've got a match on tape somewhere that I was at where Bubba Ray Dudley took a chair and he hit this guy named Bobby Duncombe Jr. with it. And I thought I just watched an assassination attempt. The
Wow.
match was stopped right away. They never even had the match. He hit him with the chair before the bell started, and he cracked him with the chair. And it was just a uh, sickening noise of metal on bone, skull bone. And so anyway, I still love pro wrestling, but what I do with the angry wrestling fan is what I call my persona online. I challenge the wrestling fans, especially the WWE fan. The WWE, which used to be called the WWF, they're such a monopoly, but they've done things that I don't politically agree with. They do shows in Saudi Arabia, at the behest of the Saudi Arabian government for big money. They, as in Vince McMahon and his wife Linda McMahon, funded Trump's 2016 campaign. They were the biggest funders of Trump. And my point is, I don't like to mix my wrestling with politics. And I find that if the wrestling fans are funding the WWE, then the McMahons who own the WWE are funding Trump. Trump's giving Linda McMahon a important job. To me, I don't want my wrestling money or my wrestling fanhood supporting any politician. And I find that that's a breach of trust, to be honest. And I confront the wrestling fans with that on my YouTube videos and in Facebook wrestling groups. And suddenly I'm the bad guy, because a lot of wrestling fans want to bury their head in their sand. They think that it's just fun and games. They don't realize that their attention to wrestling is funding things that they may not agree with themselves, but they try to put a blind spot on it because this is their escapism from reality. And I question people, can you ever really escape reality? The answer is probably not.
But you can look at it in a lot of different ways just besides that. I mean, there's certain issues with, you know, let's look at the Cosby Show.
Sure.
Everybody liked the Cosby Show. Everybody thought Bill Cosby was funny. Then when this came out, and granted, I know he's out of jail. I understand that, folks. I get everything. Don't come at me. All I'm saying is there's sometimes we don't know what we want, the entertainment, we want the escape. And I'm not defending the fans that are doing this. I'm not a wrestling fan. But sometimes they just don't even care to know that. And that's the whole fact of the matter. We are bombarded with information so much that we want to stick our head in the sand and ignore what the wizard's doing behind the curtain.
Sure.
We just want to see the big head.
No, I went to see a film like in the movie theaters here. they've been showing what they call the comeback classics, right?
Hmm.
So I'm not sure what movie it was, if it was some movie from the 90s, Dead Poet Society, or something like that. And then the movie, it says, produced by the Weinstein Company, and so it's like,
Yeah.
if we're going to retroactively say, you know, Me Too movement and Weinstein's a creep and Weinstein's a jerk. And okay, folks, do you want to give up your Matt Damon movies, your Ben Affleck movies, your Ashley Judd movies, all the movies that you saw, Frida with Salma Hayek? I mean, these women tell these stories about this abuse of Weinstein and what they had to go through in order to get Frida produced and Ashley Judd, what they endured. Well, should we crumple up these films and throw them in the garbage can and take them off the internet? And because Weinstein's involved, I don't know.
Well, we can take this back to right after 9/11, that there was a lot of talk after 9/11 about taking the towers out of any New York landscape from any old movies.
Right.
I don't think they actually did it, but there was a lot of talk about that. And you know, here's the way to look at this. Is erasing the past going to solve the problem, or is the past being there a teachable moment?
Yeah. And you know what? Go back to wrestling with that. There was the WWE recently made a deal with the Peacock streaming service, which is owned by NBC. Well, Peacock is now censoring some of the old wrestling stuff from the 80s. And there's a good, for example, Roddy Piper, probably a silly move, but he wrestled an African American wrestler named Bad News Brown at WrestleMania 6. So to promote this match, Roddy Piper painted himself half black because he was trying to make a point that it doesn't matter if you're black or white, we're all wrestlers or we're all tough guys or whatever he was trying to do. But Roddy goes into the ring and he's doing Michael Jackson moves and he's really making a spectacle of himself. And at the time, 1990, they just thought, well, that's Roddy being crazy Roddy. It's just Roddy being nuts. They even made an action figure of Roddy painted half black and half white. So now we flash forward to 2021. The Peacock Network has removed that match from WrestleMania 6. So if you're watching WrestleMania 6, you won't see Roddy Piper. You won't see Bad News Brown. You won't see Roddy Piper dressed in half black makeup because the Peacock has determined that is not sensitive or insensitive or racist. And look, I wasn't there. I wasn't making those decisions. But as a fan, to me, Roddy Piper is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Did he make a silly, stupid move here with this painting? Yeah, he did. But it was part of the show. Millions of people have seen it. Why are we pretending it didn't happen?
But how many things we can go to Oklahoma for that. How many people of us, the Oklahoma massacre, how many people even knew about that? That, nobody did. It was all hidden. Central Park, we all had this notion of what Central Park was or is, but it wasn't that way at one point. So we've sanitized history and we continue to do so. And so therefore, if you're sanitizing history while you're opening up the proverbial kettle of worms here, it always comes back out. The truth always comes back out. Just because, for instance, they took that off, but yet you and I are having a conversation about it. You and I are having a conversation about the wrestling match.
Right.
So it's still part of a conversation. It's still people still know about it.
Yeah, and that's true. And I mean, there's a guy on YouTube, Dane Calloway, that does these really powerful documentaries, mostly about, not mostly, but a lot about slavery and the things that we take as gospel. Reality, we don't really know what happened, because a lot of these historical records have been changed or warped or thrown in the garbage. So a lot of things that we learn in school books that we take as gospel may have just been someone's opinion or someone's guess as to what happened. So it's tough, and for me, what I try to get through to the wrestling fans, Donna, is if you're going to fall for this stuff just coming from wrestling, what will you fall for in real life? Like if you're going to allow this wrestling company, the McMahons, to push you around and influence your thinking on something like pro wrestling where they can't even decide their own history books, what will you allow reality to screw with you on?
But there's two things here, though. When you're talking about the history books, one state controls the rest of the country's history, what we have in our history books. Texas is a big state who actually decides the curriculum for the textbooks. That's gone on for a long time. I don't know why, but that's gone on. And when you think about it, I had American history my junior year. How can you learn 200 plus years of history in 365 days? And you're not even at school for 365 days. So you can't really learn enough about what's going on in our country and in our world to be able to make a real judgment, to know the facts. But we're being forced to learn, as the statement goes, to the victor goes the spoils.
Right.
So the victor gets to write history.
Yeah. History is written by the winners.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can't fault the education system, but then we need to look at the bigger picture and have it more balanced. It can't just be this little minutia of here's white history, because basically that's what we're teaching in school.
Sure. Yeah, that like I said, that guy Dane, first name is Dane Calloway. He's got a really thought-provoking YouTube channel that has some awesome stuff. I've never met the guy; I just watch his stuff, but I feel like I'm kind of learning to challenge things that I've learned in my life by watching some of his stuff, because he talks about some real inconsistencies with how the world has been presented to us. And in turn, I guess I try to challenge the wrestling fans or whoever else, challenge some of the things you've learned. Spike Lee did the same thing with movies, going back to Do the Right Thing and She's Gotta Have It. Spike consistently makes movies that people have to have a conversation that maybe they don't want to have. I just saw this movie called The Summer of Soul about this New York Music Festival in 1969 that was overshadowed and basically buried because everyone talks about Woodstock. But this music festival that had Stevie Wonder and all these other wonderful acts, that happened too. And nobody even thought about it until now when this documentary came out 40 years later, or whatever it is, 50 years later.
Well, there was a documentary on Netflix about crack cocaine. And the interesting thing about it is I was in school in the 80s and I took a home and family living course and a child development course. And because, that was required for girls to do stuff like that. And they showed us the movies of crack addicted babies. Well, the documentary was very eye-opening because it talked about how the government helped supply the drugs and how the police were part of this, and that the addiction was not as bad for crack. The crack addicted babies were not such an epidemic that they made it out to be. I mean, I've met people that there was a lady I met who talked about, and I think she was from Central America. Her parents originally were from Central America and they were here. And she basically became part of the Brown Baby Project back in the 60s. So she was adopted out to somebody. They took her and she was adopted out. So, I mean, I had never heard of this. And that's the thing. When you start talking to people, I think because the one benefit about us being so connected is you do find out more information that you may not have known. You do see things in a different light because, well, wait a second. How is this, how is this related to what I know? And when you were talking about reality, let's step back for one movie that you would think is not anything that should make you question reality, and that would be The Matrix. You look at The Matrix, the full Matrix, you're thinking it's an action movie. But by the end of that movie, if you were really paying attention, you stopped and said, wait a second, how do I know this is real?
Yeah, and that blue pill, red pill motif has become a big thing.
But it's true.
Yeah, that's become a big metaphor for people. Taking one of these pills will wake you up to a different form of consciousness.
If only it were that simple.
You're right. And one thing is that it can be overwhelming. You can go down so many rabbit holes on YouTube and find yourself. Here's a thing that I don't like to think of conspiracy theories as they're not necessarily right, they're not necessarily wrong. I mean, you have to look at the evidence. And when JFK was shot and killed initially, you would be called a liar or a crazy person if you thought there was a conspiracy, if you thought that there was more than one gunman. Now most people think it was more than one gunman. Well, what happened? What happened in the 30 or 40 or so years since he was shot and killed? What changed? Because the same thing happened one way or the other. But it's people's interpretation or their discovery of events or their suspicions. At one point, if you were around during World War I or World War II, you'd be off to sign up to go serve and off to defend against the bad guys. But come Vietnam, suddenly people had different thoughts. You know what I mean? Suddenly people they were running off to Canada or whatever. What changed? Something changed, but people were still dying overseas regardless. So I mean, there's something there. But if, like I said, these YouTube videos, they can drive you nuts because you start questioning things. Is Katy Perry Lisa Bonet Ramsey? You know what I mean? Like, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Like, there's all these things like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, part of it, when you think about it, part of it is a wicked game of telephone.
Sure.
You remember the game of telephone when you're a kid? Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, by the time you got to the end, it was nothing about what was said initially.
Right.
So, we tend to change things. I recently had somebody reach out to the show who wanted to be a guest, and I ended up passing because I didn't necessarily agree with what his thinking was. While it would have been an interesting topic, I felt that he might be doing a disservice to some people. And so therefore I passed. And I could have jumped on, oh yeah, he's got a great thing. It'll be great for ratings. It'll get listeners listening. But I also looked at it as if he says something to somebody and it was talking about medications and stuff, if he says something to somebody and they listen and something ends up hurting them because they decided to stop this, I don't want to be responsible for somebody hurting somebody else. This is the Better 2 podcast. It's supposed to help people, not harm them. And I couldn't take that risk. So, very much like a conspiracy theory, I could get somebody on here and let's talk conspiracy theories. Go for it. But if I feel it's going to end up harming somebody, then I don't want them on the show.
Yeah, well, that's you are showing integrity with your content, and that's good. And what I question myself and other people is, how do we spend our time? And I have issues with that too, of course. Like if I'm watching a 3-hour pro wrestling show and then I just get frustrated because, wow, they didn't, book, which means who wins and who loses. Mm-hmm. They didn't do this show the way I would have done it, or I'm better, I could be a better ring announcer than who they've got or whatever. I'm just spending 3 hours of my time getting frustrated and angry about something where I could have watched a documentary. I could have read a book. I mean, I've got 200 books that I brought with me from Rhode Island to Florida, and I probably read 5 of them, so I've got 195 more to read, so how we spend our time is something that people don't think about. I just watched the Social Dilemma doc on Netflix last night about the manipulation of social media. Facebook was a big part of it. And it's tough because I use Facebook in order to connect with people, to promote myself. At the same time, thinking about how they are manipulating me, you, and everybody else is scary. I wrote an article on my website, Living for Likes. I wrote that 5 years ago, and it was published in something called Privacy Journal, where I basically took other information from the New York Times and other sources about social media and the manipulation, especially of Facebook. At the time, they were talking to the minister of propaganda in China, and so I really kind of am aware of the manipulation of Facebook, yet I'm still on it, and it's tough.
Well, the thing is with social media, and even since this documentary has come out, we can talk about the fact that it's all an algorithm. It's always an algorithm. We'll even talk about Amazon with that because I have one of my novels, My Days with the Dark Muse. The paperback, they like screwing with the price. They have at one point a few weeks ago, they had it less than the actual ebook.
Right.
And I'm like, how is this possible? One person bought it. As soon as they bought it, the price went back up. So how do I promote this on social media if it's going to be a sale and I have no knowledge? They don't tell you it's going to be on sale. But what I'm getting at is, so there's that algorithm. But then like on TikTok, okay, if you're willing to be on this app for hours a day doing so many different clips, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make your videos happen. We're going to get you on that For You page and you're going to be rolling through constantly. Okay. I don't do that. I get on TikTok maybe once a week, maybe twice. My hits 300 to 400. Most I've ever had is a duet with somebody for 1,200. But I know some people that are on there daily and it affects their freaking mood. They will be okay because they're getting all these likes, they're getting all these sales. And then the next day, their next video does squat. And their mood is like, oh, nobody likes me. What are we doing to people? And you wonder why ADHD is so high. We are watching these little clips that are like this. Think about that. Think about if we actually stepped away from our phones. And I mean, I'm guilty of it. But if we actually stepped away and not got distracted by our phones, and it goes back to the social dilemma, and not being so plugged in all the time that, dare I say, oh, the phone dinged, I better get that. I mean,
no, another example is if you ever go to a fast food restaurant, you're standing in line to order, you get up to the counter, and then you think you're about to order, but then they start talking in the headset to the person, the drive-through. Or if you ever go to a business person's office and you're in their office, you're in the chair, you just shook hands, the phone rings, they give you the one and they pick up the phone and talk to whoever's on the phone over the person that's right in front of you. And I notice these things about myself, and I do think that the younger generations, they're really in trouble because they were born and had a smartphone in their little hand before they could talk. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I went to the gym last week, and as I'm, going to the shower, minding my own business, in my periphery vision, I see something that was a little weird in another gym shower. A guy was in the gym shower with his phone in the gym shower. So the water wasn't running, but he literally was in the shower. I'm assuming about to take a shower with his phone in the shower. And I mean, if you've ever, well, you haven't, but in the men's room, you'll see guys on their phones while they're using the urinals. It's like, come on. Don't you have any respect for the person on the other end of the phone?
My two things about that. The guy in the shower, maybe he was taking unsolicited pics for future events for, DMing somebody. My husband actually, he went in the bathroom one time and he's like, I just couldn't handle myself. I had to be an asshole. And I'm like, well, what happened? He's like, this guy, I'm sitting there on the phone. He's sitting there on the phone. He wasn't, my husband wasn't, but the guy was on the phone and he's just sitting there talking. Right. And he's like, I started responding. And then finally I'm like, man, I really have to take a shit. And the guy's like, I gotta go. But I mean, my husband's just like, come on, it's the bathroom.
Have a little respect for the sanctity of what we're doing here, gentlemen, please.
Yeah. I mean, you don't, it happens. I understand you can take the call, but then usually if you take that call, you usually just say, okay, I'll call you right back. You don't have a freaking conversation.
No, I think it's atrocious what happens in men's rooms. It really is, which is it's another podcast perhaps. But what goes on, the worst, I'll tell you this, it's not a disgusting story. The worst thing I ever saw in a men's room was I went to a men's room and I had just taken a flight to Baltimore Washington Airport, and I go to the men's room after the long flight, and it's packed, like all these guys coming off airplanes all over the world. And there was like a 12-year-old kid standing in the middle of the restroom licking a vanilla ice cream cone. And I mean, it's not my kid. I don't know who this kid is, but I feel like taking him aside or take me to your parents. Let's have a discussion. You don't want to be licking ice cream in the middle of the men's room. That's not clean. It's not good. It's disgusting. But what can you do?
Nothing like a
Wasn't
petri
my
dish.
day. I mean, I just it amazed me that that would happen in this day and time. But there it was.
Well, I think I don't, as smart as we've gotten, I don't think we've gotten as smart as we should be. I mean,
Yeah.
in the 80s, I had a girl, she's like, okay, we're going to go shopping and we work together. And she's like, well, I got to wash my hands. I'm like, well, we just left work. She goes, that's okay. I'm going to do it the natural way. I'm like, okay. So she's spitting her hand
Oh boy.
and then does this number. And I'm just sitting there going, okay, how is that sanitary?
Yeah.
But anyway, we've digressed. So, so you're gonna have you got your books. I'm gonna put your podcast or your YouTube channel and your book up on the podcast site, so all your links will be there. So I take it that you are definitely happy that you move. It was definitely a better two choice.
Yeah, if we the basic point is, I was happy I moved. It was a better two choice. I did not know that this, worldwide crisis was going to happen, but I definitely know that it was the right choice because the way that this part of the country is, Florida has handled things, to me, is a lot more freedom based than where I was. So if nothing else, that came through. There's other parts to that, but that's the biggest thing. Like uh, that ability to go see a movie or to go to a coffee shop and not get kicked out by the security guard. That's really the win there.
Okay. Well, I thank you for your time.
I thank you for your time and thanks for having this great show. And I've enjoyed many of the prior episodes, and I will continue to on the Better Two podcast. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for tuning in to the Better Two podcast. Your listenership is greatly appreciated. If you like what you hear, remember to hit subscribe. We also have our videos on YouTube. They're usually posted the same day as the podcast, and you should check it out. If you have a question or you would like to be a guest on the show, please drop me an email, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. The email is Donna, Dauna, at thebettertwopodcast.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and catch you next time.